You're listening to the Cinemental Podcast.
Shall we begin?
All right, welcome back to the Cinemental Podcast, where we discuss mental health themes from cinema, television, and popular culture. I'm Jeffrey Jones, and I'm a filmmaker and professor, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother, Dr. Joshua Jones, who is absolutely obsessed with the DSM-5, and he's also a general and forensic psychiatrist.
I didn't write that intro. You just wrote that, right?
Yeah, correct.
I have one, like literally within our arm's reach.
Yeah, I didn't write it as a joke, Josh. You're
yeah.
obsessed with the DSM-5.
I love the DSM-5. I love the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Illness because it gives us a way to talk about it. And people shit on the DSM all the time.
To talk about psychiatry and mental health, right? What's the it? It's psychiatry and mental health?
Oh, yeah. It's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Illness. And people shit on it all the time saying, it's just made up. And well, yeah, it's just a way for us to talk about mental health.
Right.
The planet Neptune's not actually named Neptune. Somebody made that up because we needed to have words to talk about this shit. And anyways, this topic drives me nuts. People shit on the DSM-5 just for us trying to have a way to talk about real things that people are suffering with. Diagnoses are just shorthand ways for medical professionals to communicate with each other. They do not capture the great things about you, person, nor was it meant to. It's meant to tell me, without having to repeat a 5-hour psychiatric evaluation of you, that you've got depression, and we should start to think about treating your depression.
Yeah, I love the moment in Endgame where where Thor meets the Guardians of the Galaxy, and he's like, "Oh, I have to head to this planet," and he's like, "Well, that's a made up word." He's like, "All words are made up," and it's like, yeah, that's exactly right. Like all words are made up, and I quote that all the time when people are like, "That's not a real word." I'm like, "Sure it is," because I just said it out loud. Like that made it real. All sounds that come out of your mouth are real.
Yeah, all words are made up. But
all
that's
right,
not what
Josh.
we're talking about today, Jeff.
That's not what we're talking about today. We are talking about the movie Obsession. But first, Josh, we want you to start your week off right with our podcast. So we drop a new episode every Monday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, or you can watch our hottest and spiciest clips and full episodes on the tubes of you. Today we're talking about Obsession, Josh. And Obsession follows a chef from Chicago named The Bear. Oh, sorry.
Nope.
No, we're not covering The Bear.
No, we're not
That's
covering
right.
The Bear.
Sorry. Right.
Sorry. Also a little bit about Obsession.
Also a little bit about
Obsession.
Obsession.
We're talking about today.
Right, yeah, not doing the show. Okay, yeah, sorry. Obsession follows a character named Bear, but he's a lonely music store employee who uses a supernatural one-wish willow to make his crush Nikki fall in love with him, only to discover that forced love curdles into violent, terrifying possession.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah. There you go. Josh, what are the topics we're going to cover today?
We are going to talk a little bit about Obsession, although we're going to point out that that's not really what this movie's about.
Correct.
We're going to talk about codependence, whether that's a thing, what it really means. You're going to talk a lot about indie filmmaking, a discussion that I'm really, really interested in, and about how, some indie filmmakers are spawning off their YouTube content, which I would love to see that happen to you, my friend.
Me too.
And then we're going to do a deep dive into something that we don't talk enough about as a psychological concept, but is in the vernacular all over the place in our society, and that's consent. What is it? What does it mean? And how should we be thinking about it in today's times?
I'm actually surprised that, we're 89 episodes into this podcast now, and we have not talked about consent that much. And so I'm glad we're getting a chance to talk about it today. And I was surprised at the thematic framework around consent for this film. This movie really wasn't about obsession. The woman is possessed. She's not obsessed, she's possessed.
Yeah.
And it really interestingly becomes a conversation about consent after he learns about her possession. And so I'm excited that we're going to get to talk about that today. There's a lot to unpack.
Well, I think Obsession is a catchier title. I mean, possession sounds a little bit more. You're going to draw a different type of
100%.
person for supernatural horror. And I think titling the movie Consent, that's probably a buzzkill.
Right. Sure. If you're going to call something possession, you want to see an exorcism, and that was never going to happen in this movie. So,
well, a movie called Possession, you're going to have the girl spider walk up a wall and have her head turn around. Yeah.
They did a pretty close version of that in this film where she walks backwards. When Nikki takes back her body and moves in weird ways, it was a pretty freaky part of the film, but they didn't go full walk on the walls. And I thought that subtle difference helped set this movie apart. Okay, let's dive in a little bit, Josh. I like to start with the theme of the film first so that we can kind of frame the conversation. And rather than get into one of the mental health things, I'm going to talk a little bit about filmmaking here at the top. So the theme of this movie, very simple. What if you could wish that someone would love you? That's the what if. The theme is be careful what you wish for. Our wishes have unforeseen consequences, et cetera, et cetera. Great theme. This is something that we've all thought about. I'm sure that there isn't a person in the world who hasn't said oh man, I really wish so-and-so would love me the way that I would want them to. We've all been there. It makes this a very... Yeah, there you go. Oh, God. Oh, I know what you meant, but cheese and rice, man. One of my issues with this film was they didn't do a great job of fully exploring that theme. And one of the issues that I will often see with young writers, and Curry Barker made an incredible short, and that's what gave him the movie. And I think Obsession was a hit. I think that it deserves everything it's gotten, because it is really well made and there's a lot to love about it. But one of the things that I had an issue with was the protagonist is incredibly inactive. And you will often see with young filmmakers or young writers these inactive protagonists. And it's because when we're young, a lot of life happens to us. We go to school. People tell us what to learn. People tell us what to do. People sort of teach us our morals. And so a lot of our life is looking at the world and being given things to do rather than being the driving force.
Do you mean in this case he's inactive because, he makes the wish and then stuff just happens to him?
Exactly. He makes the wish, and even him making the wish is because he can't tell her how he feels. He's incapable of making that action. And then once the wish happens, he just kind of reacts to it and doesn't do much. I could not stand the protagonist of this movie. Yes, he was very inactive. He was just wholly unlikable. He was whiny. There was no rooting interest for him whatsoever. You could really classify this as incel cinema. This woman won't have sex with me, and now she's forced to. It's not that far away from it. She was incredible. The actress that played Nikki was amazing. Her performance was amazing. You should go see it for that. But the protagonist here was wholly unlikable. But all this is to say, the most interesting scene in the film was Nikki asks the bear. I keep thinking of the show The Bear. Nikki asks Bear to kill her. She's taken her body back. It's the middle of the night. And she says, hey, she's asleep, meaning this obsessed person who's taken over her body. She's asleep. Please kill me. And he asks, why is it so hard to love me? And it's a really fascinating scene because in that moment, to me, he becomes a pure villain where it's that the real Nikki is trapped in there and your response is, why can't you just do what I want you to do? And man, in that moment, he becomes the villain.
I want people to remember that moment. It's going to be very important to think about when we have our conversation about consent coming up.
Yeah.
But continue. So in that moment,
he really does become the villain. Now, this movie would have been a lot better if they had gone down one of two paths. As soon as he knows that Nikki's trapped because of his wish, she is no longer giving consent. And he knows that. And so the movie should be one of two things. It should be he fights like hell to get her out, because the only way that she can get out is if he dies, and he tries to find a workaround eventually with someone wishing that his wish was undone. So he tries like hell to get her out, or he tries like hell to get the obsessed girl to act normal so that he can continue living the fantasy. And in the second one, he's a massive villain.
Yeah.
And in the first one, he's a little bit likable, in that he's now trying to undo his wish that he realized was wrong. But they didn't go down either of those paths till very late in the film. And I wish that they would have picked a path and picked it earlier, because for the majority of the movie, he is just an unlikable, inactive protagonist.
There's a part of me that, hearing your description of it, even more than what I know about it, is he reminds me of the young boy character. I think this gets to your point that this is kind of incel fantasy. He reminds me of the young boy character from Adolescence.
Yes.
Especially in the episode in Adolescence when the young boy was being interviewed by the forensic psychologist. And he kind of wrestled with this a little bit. Bear wrestled with this a very small amount.
Very small.
That was super problematic. And you're right, that made him the villain immediately.
Exactly. Like one of my favorite scenes, and this is before he realizes that like this is due to the wish. She has stayed up all night and has duct taped the door shut. And he wakes up in the morning and he's like, "You've just got to stop acting this way." And then he goes to work and hits on somebody else at work. And it's like, dude, your friend is obviously struggling here. It's a pretty good indication that like, and I know that, we know because it's a movie that like the One Wish Willow worked, and you wouldn't necessarily like ever believe that, a wish worked in real life. But like, come on, man. Too much in the movie was him being like, "Nicky, you've got to stop acting so weird and so obsessed with me." No, man, you get one or two of those in a film, and then we need to do something. Then we need to do something about it and stop being so inactive. And so this would have been a better movie in my mind had the main character been a lot more active. Okay, Josh, let's talk though about consent, because that was the most interesting part of this film for me. It gets brought up pretty early on by the best friend character, who I'll talk about a little bit later, but he is my favorite character in the movie. He doesn't invite Bear to a party, and he says, "Look, I don't know what's going on with Nicky, but it feels like you're taking advantage of her. She has become this different person, and it really feels like you're taking advantage of her." And I was really impressed that they went there, and I wish that they would have pushed a little bit further. And so I want to talk about consent, Josh, but I also want to ask you a question first.
Sure.
Okay, so Bear makes this wish, and all of a sudden, Nicky's all over him. In real life, if that were to happen, there's no reasonable person that would assume that One Wish Willow worked.
Yeah, sure. I mean, what a funny lark. I used the One Wish Willow, and then all of a sudden the person that I want to love me is falling in love with me.
Exactly.
But see, Jeff, I think that this is actually a really interesting mirror to probably a lot of adolescent type relationships. Right? Where people are like, well, if I do this one thing, maybe so-and-so will start to like me. And sometimes that works. Most of the time it doesn't. And you move on because heartbreak is part of growth.
Right.
But anyways, your
exactly.
question, because I think I'm going to love this question that you're about to ask.
My question is, at what point do we wonder, and at what point is it our responsibility to ask, is someone's consent being given as freely as they want?
Jeff, I think the very straightforward answer to that question is, at this day and age, and before this day and age has just heightened our sensitivity thinking about consent, is that you always need to be asking yourself, is consent given freely? Let's dive into that, because I mean, the psychological underpinnings of consent to me is fascinating. And you may not know this, but a lot of what a forensic psychiatrist does is evaluate whether or not someone can give consent.
Right.
Not necessarily about sex, but about a whole host of other things, because consent really does underpin what we do as humans. So what's really fascinating about this movie is that when Bear uses his wish to force Nicky to love him, we watch her identity violently fracture, right?
Right.
Her body mimics intimacy, but her consciousness breaks through in moments of sheer panic. It is a literal manifestation, and the best that I've experienced, of what happens when we strip away a human being's right to choose.
Okay.
So consent isn't just like a legal checkbox or something reserved exclusively for sexual encounters. It's the invisible scaffolding of everyday life and negotiations between humans. Every time you ask a friend before venting about your day, when you check if a colleague has time to talk, or if you touch a partner's shoulder, you're practicing consent. Psychologically, consent is how we feel safe. When we know our boundaries are respected, our nervous system drops out of high alert, fight or flight mode, and settles into a state of trust.
Yeah, Josh, that's so interesting, and especially mentioning like when he makes the wish. I was watching this with my buddy who's a showrunner, and he brought this point up, and I thought it was great. In that moment, she comes back to his car and lies to him, tries to manipulate him, and does all the things you do when you want someone to love you. And it's interesting because you see her try and fail, and then he's weirded out, so she tries something else. So it's not just that she like walks up and says like, hey, I love you. She does all the things that we do when we're sort of trying to get someone to love us. You know, she goes even so far as to lie, but I mean, a lot of us do. And a lot of us like put our best foot forward when we first meet someone. We're not entirely honest about everything. And I thought that was a great bit of storytelling, having her do what we all do, which is lie to kind of get that consent that we're looking for, to appeal to someone for what we want.
Well, I think we're going to talk more about that moment and dynamic when we talk about codependency and obsession, because the person that's being described as having the obsession in this movie is not Bear. It is the possessed Nikki character.
Correct.
She becomes obsessed with Bear,
right,
and shows a lot of the behaviors that we'll talk about a little bit more closely about when we talk about codependency. But you're right. In that moment, she has really lost the ability to give consent because she's possessed. We find that out later.
Right.
But in that moment, she's lost the ability to convey the four main components of consent.
Right.
Okay. And this is what I look for when I evaluate somebody if they can give consent. And they are very briefly, 1, the ability to voice a choice.
Okay.
2, the freedom and cognitive clarity or capacity to make a choice completely free from intoxication, fear, or pressure. 3, knowing exactly what you are agreeing to, no hidden agendas, no moving goalposts. And 4, a voluntary, active, enthusiastic choice. Compliance because you feel worn down or trapped is not consent.
It's such a fascinating concept. The more that I learn about it and the more that, I listen, and I think that's an important thing for men to do, the more I'm like, man, it is really tricky to enter into, a sexual relationship. You have to think about this even from the standpoint of like, hey, we're in bed right now. We're fooling around. Somebody has said yes, but are they only saying yes because they don't feel safe to say no, and should we like hop out of bed and go downstairs and like go to a cafe, go to where they're around other people and be like, I want to make sure you're really okay with this. That sounds unreasonable, but I also think it's really important, especially for men, to really do that calculus and think if there is anything that could be manipulating somebody's consent.
Well, Jeff, let's be very honest about the era that we're living in. We are in the midst of a massive social reckoning, which I think is very good.
I agree. I totally agree.
And this is where the real world danger of the playful boundary pushing comes in, right?
Right.
Even early in the film, before the magic occurs, Bear's advised to be playfully mean to Nikki to win her over, right?
Right.
We see this in dating all the time. The teasing, the deliberate blurring of lines under the guise of it's just a joke.
Right.
But ambiguous consent is psychologically volatile.
Right.
Today, failing to secure clear consent carries devastating real-world consequences, legal, social, professional, not to mention the trauma that you're inflicting upon somebody who's not giving true consent.
Right.
But beyond avoiding these consequences, we owe it to our partners, out of basic human decency, to be absolutely non-ambiguous with our consent.
Yeah.
The playful no, chase me, that's got to go.
Yeah.
It's got to go.
Yeah, I see this on TikTok a lot where a woman will say like, it's like, oh, I was trying to like be playful and say no. And then he was like, all right, great. Have a great life. And I was like, why didn't he chase me? And then a lot of people are in the comments like, because you fucking said no. Like, this is what a real man in this day and age is supposed to do, is to have a unequivocal acceptance of boundaries. And so, and look, I don't want to even step towards, Josh, blaming any of this on women. and to say that because it's true. I think women do need to tell me exactly what you're willing to do and not. But it is more about, I think, the men really looking at whether the yes is in no way manipulated. Because let's say you're hooking up in a dorm room or a frat house. Does someone feel comfortable knowing that there's 60 men close by? Is that yes given because someone feels the pressure that they're going to break up with me if I don't say yes? Have you made a comment of well, I really wish that we could hook up, and if we don't, I might move on? Did you say something like that? That's manipulation. That's not somebody then, giving clear consent. Yes, even does not necessarily mean that consent is fully given. And I think we need to understand that yes is not even as much as we should be searching for when it comes to consent.
Yeah, Jeff, totally right. And let me summarize and conclude with this. Seeking and giving true clarity isn't a mood killer. It is the ultimate form of respect. If you have to trick, manipulate, or playfully wear someone down to get to a yes, you aren't engaging with a partner.
Right.
You are trying to make that partner into an object.
Right.
True intimacy can only exist when both people have the absolute freedom to say no.
Right.
Because as obsession shows us, love minus clarity isn't romance, it's horror.
Well said. Very well said. And I will add on to this, Josh, because, if people are oh, this is unrealistic, or, oh, how can you be the full breadth of romance without, some of this playful banter? Once you've established consent and you've set the ground rules, you can do whatever you want. In a relationship, you can say hey, we're in a relationship now. I give you consent. There might be times where I might be cute about it and say no, but really want you to pursue me. That's giving consent about that playful banter. If that's within the bounds of a trusting relationship, you can do, that sort of stuff, as long as the consent is there and it's fully understood in advance. So we're not saying you can't be playful. You have to earn that with your partner.
That's right. You have to earn the playfulness. Oh, Jeff, that is so well said. Because that's what I tell people when they're well, that's super ridiculous. And, well, if my wife and I want to, goof around and have code words and things like that, that's great. You guys have earned the trust to give the consent, to have your safe words, to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. But you haven't earned that with someone you're trying to pick up in a bar. I don't have any problem with people trying to pick people up in bars.
Absolutely.
But we need to come to, a new clear code about how we're doing this so that everyone is respected and honored.
Well, let me ask you this though, Josh, because this is, I think, trickier than that. You go to a bar, meet someone for the first time, they've been drinking. Can consent possibly be given?
For sexual activity that night, I mean, if they've had more than just one, maybe not. Maybe not.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I'll say this.
I've
definitely had one night stands with people that I've met at a bar and we drank together. I mean, I can fully admit to that. In no case do I feel, obviously I'm going to say this, but in no case do I feel like anybody was necessarily taken advantage of. I had a fruitful relationship with all of those people post that night, but I'm not the one who gets to say that the relationship was okay. I'm not the one who gets to say that. From my opinion, everything seemed fine, but I don't get to make that claim for somebody else.
Yep.
Any last things you want to say about consent, Josh? Because I think we talk about it in terms of the sexual nature, but I think consent is even important, in the workplace, where if you're a manager, if you're in a position of power, and you say something let's just say someone's hey, I really like this idea of mine. What do you think?
Oh,
you
Jeff,
have power over someone, and they're not really free to say no.
Yeah, this is a whole other giant kettle of fish. Because in my monologue here about consent, I didn't really talk about a differing power dynamic. Once you throw a differing power dynamic into it, it becomes a very quick question, and I think pretty clear question about whether consent can be freely given. I think the answer is no. So I think any workplace relationship that happens, especially when there's a power dynamic, is a non-consensual relationship. I know some people are going to tell me that I'm wrong, and at me all you want. Happy to have this conversation. But
it's really hard to hear, Josh, because I was an agent and my wife was one of my clients.
I know.
There was a power dynamic there, and I'll tell you this. I don't have any power in this relationship. So that power dynamic that might have existed when I was the agent and she was the client, it's no more. There is zero power that I have in my 20-year relationship.
I would posit that an agent-client relationship is actually a little bit different than a traditional workplace relationship because, yes, you're the one that is going out and getting the client jobs, but the client's also the one who's paying you. So it's a different relationship. It's not as clear-cut as, a hierarchical workplace, in a corporation where there's a boss, there are subordinates, and two of them are fucking. I mean, that is a clear power dynamic. I would say that that's non-consensual. But again, I also think, as with everything, there's not like non-consensual consensual. There's some variation there. It's clearly not to the same level of rights violation as someone who is attacked by a stranger on the street. It's just not, and we have to be clear about that. But I would also say it's not 100% consensual because of the power dynamic.
Yeah. Just to bring it back to the movie, Josh, and then we'll move on. I think we can both agree that, as soon as Bear puts it together that she is possessed and that she's only doing this because of the wish, that's when everything has to stop.
Correct.
That's when consent has no longer been given. You're obviously going to have to come to terms with what you did to this poor girl once she's not possessed anymore. But, once he even has an inkling that this is because of the One Wish Willow, she is no longer consented, and you need to back off.
Yeah, and I will put this in the context of the picking someone up in a bar situation when you realize that they are intoxicated. Yeah. You've got three choices. The worst choice is continue down the path and continue to try to pick up on them, which is what Bear does, for a while. A less bad but not good choice is to just walk away. And then the right choice is like, hey, you're distressed. Let me help you make sure you're safe. Yeah, that's the human correct thing to do. Bear didn't do that here.
Yeah.
He thought just about himself. Oh, why am I so hard to love?
Yeah.
And that's what made him the villain.
I had a instance where I was at a conference way back when I used to go to Promax, and there was a woman who it was like almost 2 a.m. It was closing time at the bar. She'd had a lot to drink, and I can't remember what her plan was to get home, but I called an Uber and I just put her in it. And the next day I saw her and she was like, "Oh my God, thank you so much. That was such a classy thing to do. I didn't have to worry about getting home. We had a great conversation, and it was just cool. It was just a cool thing to do." And I was like, thank you very much. And then we, hung out again, later, had a good time. She introduced me to a bunch of people that she knew. But every time I saw her at Promax after that, she would just kind of give me that thumbs up of that was a classy move, dude.
That feels super good.
Yeah, and I've done that a number of times where it's like, hey, let me get you home safe. I'm not even going to be in the Uber with you. There's no expectation of anything here other than I just want to see you, get home safe.
For our listeners, Promax is a conference for agents and industry folks. It's a much better conference, by the way, than Amateur Min.
It's such a dumb joke. It's such a dumb joke that I'm glad you made, because why not? Why not?
And what I really appreciate about you, Jeff, is you knew where I was going with it.
Oh, totally.
And you were just like, you know what? I'm going to let him have this one. Yeah, I'm just going to let him have this one.
Yeah, it's like, with your kids, it's like, he's fully dressed. He's walking towards the kiddie pool. I'm going to let him have his fun. I could help him out of those wet clothes later. Oh, good sense. All right, Josh, let's move on to talking about obsession. As we've mentioned, this movie isn't really about obsession. It's more about possession. And Nikki doesn't even necessarily act in ways where she's obsessed. She acts in really unrealistic ways that an obsessed person doesn't necessarily react. I'm speaking specifically about in one scene, he leaves and she waits in front of the door, doesn't move, to the point where she pees and poops herself. I think it's probably fair to say that that is not what an obsessed person does in your experience. But what does obsession actually look like?
Well, Jeff, I'm going to challenge you on that, actually.
Oh, boy.
Because I think that some of the things that Nikki does with the obsession part of her, possession, duct taping the door, standing there waiting, not to the point where she poops and pees herself, but I think some of those are probably taken from closely related real life things that has happened to somebody when they've gotten in a relationship with somebody who becomes obsessed with them. This kind of stuff happens in relationships, especially, with younger folks, especially when you get into a relationship with somebody who might have a personality disorder. And they might start to view you as the solution to all their problems that they feel inside. We see this a lot in the types of personality disorders where somebody vacillates between over-idealization of somebody and devaluation of somebody. The specific personality disorder I'm talking about is borderline personality disorder, which I'm not saying Nikki had. But you can see where someone gets into such a elated relationship. This person's the most amazing thing ever. They overvalue that. They see them in such a light that they can't possibly live up to. And then if any failing occurs, they immediately go to the severe devaluation. This person's the worst person ever. I think they're stalking me, even though they've called them a couple times. I have seen this happen in people that I have counseled over and over and over again. Okay. So I think a lot of those things that Nikki does while she's possessed to show obsession, they're close to real life stuff that has happened in relationships. They're giant red flags to you if you find yourself doing something like that.
Is there a different term that you use in the DSM-5 other than obsession? Or is obsession a pretty good word for whatever the psychiatric diagnosis would be?
Obsession is just a descriptor. It's a symptom of thinking about something, ruminating on it over and over and over and over again. Where you actually see it in the DSM-5, in our diagnostic manual, is actually obsessive compulsive disorder, where somebody has these ruminative thoughts, then they develop, compulsive behaviors like checking, tapping, tics, things like that to try to alleviate their anxiety. Not really what we're talking about here, but obsession is really just a term that indicates somebody is thinking about it over and over and over again, ruminating it about to the point where you really talk about like a thought spiral. Things spiral out of control is what people who've experienced this describe to me as how their thoughts go.
So let's take a step back from obsessive compulsive disorder, because that makes sense. But when does a healthy relationship start to become unhealthy? It starts to look like what the layman would call obsession. And like, oh my God, they're just obsessed with me. How do you have a healthy relationship, or how do you differentiate between like you have a healthy relationship with like, hey, I want to be around that person. I really enjoy being around that person. I want to do what it takes to be around that person. I'm going to move my day around so that I can be around this person that I really, really enjoy. What's the fine line between that and an unhealthy obsession?
Let's talk for a moment about ego strength. Jeff, you know what ego is. Your ego is your self-conception of who you are, right? Some people have a really strong ego. They know who they are. Some people have, kind of more of a fluid ego. They're like, I'm not really sure who I am yet. Younger people, especially as you're growing, you don't really know who you are. You try on a lot of different things. Jeff, I remember your black makeup goth phase very, very well.
Yeah.
He didn't have one, guys.
What are you talking about? I totally did.
But anyways.
I was heavily influenced by the movie The Crow.
But my point is that we develop more of a stronger ego as we age. Some people don't, and they continue to kind of feel lost, have an unstable sense of self. And so they will oftentimes try to define themselves through somebody else's ego strength. Now, that may not be very easy for people to identify. Obviously, these are psychiatric terms. But the way to identify if you're kind of getting into that is, can you be okay being apart from each other?
Right.
Is it okay to be apart? Does one of you like to be apart way more than the other?
Right.
And if that's the case, that's probably a situation in which the ego strengths aren't matching and where one person might start to become, quote, obsessed with the other.
Josh, that makes so much sense. I teach theme a lot, obviously, in my classes. And what really helps people to understand theme is when I talk about anti-theme or the lie that the character believes. And so it's that false belief.
Yes.
And people understand theme better when they understand the anti-theme. You believe that if you love someone, you hold them tight. And then Nemo's dad goes on the journey, realizes he's holding his kid too tight. And if you really love someone, you need to let them be free. But it's that anti-theme and theme that helps to understand the concept fully. I understand obsession so much more now that you put it in the term of ego strength and ego strength and ego weakness. People that have a weaker ego and weaker sense of self are more likely to, quote unquote, be obsessed with someone else because that person helps them to, they're their port in the storm. I mean, they help them feel safe and feel okay, and they're going to do whatever they can. If you're swimming in terrible seas and there's a dock over there, you're going to do whatever you can to get to that dock and to feel and to weather those waters. But if you're living in a calm ocean, you just kind of sit there in your inner tube and soak up some rays, and that's that ego strength. That really helps me understand that.
Jeff, that is a great analogy, actually. I love that. The floating in the lake with in your inner tube, picking up rays. Because if you and your partner have really good ego strength, you can be in your inner tubes floating and holding hands for a while and then let go, and one of you goes and floats down by the reeds and the other, and then you'll float back and there's no anxiety about it.
Right.
There's no anxiety. That is a great analogy for two people with good ego strengths in a relationship. Right now, I haven't seen my wife in a couple weeks because she is up in Seattle.
Boinking some other dude.
I mean, well, maybe. I'm glad you brought that up because that is actually, let's be honest, that is actually a possibility. It doesn't consume my thoughts at all.
Sure.
Because, I have
it's
good
a
ego
possibility
strength.
in the multiverse sort of possibility. Josh and I don't actually think that's a possibility. I'm sure Josh doesn't actually think it's a possibility, but it's a possibility of she could also be on the moon, in the multiverse. It's a possibility.
But Jeff, the point is that somebody without good ego strength, and somebody who's obsessed, might be thinking about that possibility all the time with the constant texts, the constant calls, the sudden, hey, I just showed up. I know you're at work, but I just showed up to surprise you. You're not really there to surprise them. You're there to check to see if they're boinking some other dude, right? That is what we're talking about when we talk about obsession in a relationship.
Yeah. Sorry. So you were saying that Vicky's out in Seattle at the World Cup hanging out with just hot soccer players?
Probably. Knowing her, probably. Yeah. Well, she actually did. She actually was like Marshawn Lynch's handler for the parade, the March to the Match. So yeah,
that's so cool.
She spent,
I love Marshawn Lynch.
All morning with Marshawn Lynch.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's awesome.
And she said he was the nicest dude. Everybody wants a piece of Marshawn Lynch, and he was just accommodating and hey.
That's what I've heard, and there's stories of him on Thanksgiving, just giving turkeys, to poor people, and not wanting any press about it. Just as hey, I want to help out my community. I'm going to give some turkeys. He seems like a really great guy. Okay, very quickly, Josh, because I'm just fascinated by the topic. What's the difference between obsession and codependence?
Not a lot. Not a lot. So codependence is when you are in the type of relationship that we just described
Okay.
But that obsession is going kind of both ways, right?
Okay.
So hence the dependent on each other. And the dependency that we're talking about in that relationship relates back to the ego strength, where neither of you have a really strong ego, and the codependency is that you are dependent on each other for that ego strength. So I kind of like to think of it as a Venn diagram where, in a healthy relationship, there's overlap, right? But in a codependent relationship, it's almost total overlap where
Gotcha.
one can't really exist without the other. Well, you feel that way. Obviously, you can exist without the other. One can't exist without the other.
Right.
And you really don't have your own. In some ways, you don't really have your own agency.
I thought codependence was more of something like OCD, where, you might be a person who is a codependent person enter in a relationship. The other person isn't codependent at all, but you still have a codependency. You might even have good ego strength, but just there's this piece of you that can never get over that dependency. Is that not a thing?
No,
There's Codependence Anonymous. There's all sorts of
Yep, yeah, for sure. What you're describing is a type of codependency where one of the people has convinced them that they're not codependent, but they really are. So, for instance, let's talk about the relationship in which one person is a raging alcoholic, and the other person in the relationship picks up the pieces for them.
right?
You're going to say, anybody looking at that relationship from the outside is going to say, oh, you're the strong one. You're the one with all the ego strength because you pick up after them and you're
Right,
you're
but they're
the
not.
rock.
That's the codependent.
But they're not. They're codependent.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. I mean, until they pull away and say, I can't do this anymore. They are in a codependent relationship. It's just not, it appears unequal, but there is true codependency there. Does that make sense?
It does. I want to find a movie where we can talk more about that because I'm fascinated about codependency.
Leaving Las Vegas is a massively good example of that. I know it's dated now, but it is one of the best ones that I think.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
And the Elizabeth Shue character becomes codependent with Nicolas Cage's drinking for a while. And then, at the end, then she does it. She's like, I've got to get out of here.
It would be so worth covering, but I don't know that enough people would want to see it. We should just cover it because
it's nobody's favorite movie.
No.
Right?
No.
Yeah.
It's my favorite Nicolas Cage movie. Leaving Las Vegas or Con Air? I think most people are going to say Con Air. Put the bunny back in the box.
If you give them that choice, they're all going to say The Rock, which is the correct answer.
Or Firebirds.
That's yours and my favorite, but I think two people have seen
the greatest. I am the greatest. Oh
Yeah,
my God, that's a good movie.
If you haven't seen
Tommy Lee
Firebirds,
Jones's,
it was
so
really,
good.
really good for Jeff and I back when we were teenagers.
Yeah, I mean, how many movies about helicopters have you seen? Not that many. God, that was a good movie. I love Firebirds. Okay, I'm going to mention this very quickly, Josh, just because I want to geek out about the film for just a second. I want to just talk about the best friend in films. Best friends are hard to write because oftentimes they will just sort of service the main character and they're not fully fleshed out characters. The best friend in this movie was one of my absolute favorite characters. It's the Ian character. And he looks like your typical kind of frat bro, he looks like an archetype. And he's very much not. He's very much a real full person. And he gives Bear really good advice at the very beginning of the movie, where he's like, do not ask her on a date at trivia night. That's not what trivia night's about. Trivia night's about the friends getting together. It's the wrong place to do it. And he's absolutely right. And through the movie, he continually gives him good advice. He's the one who says, we think you're kind of taking advantage of her a little bit. He has the come to Jesus with Bear, but he's not perfect. And that's what makes him such a good character. In the end, Bear is trying to convince him, hey, I have this one wish, Willow. What I need you to do is just wish that I never made the wish. Come on, man, just do it for me. And the best friend grabs the one wish Willow and says, I wish for $1 billion, and snaps it. And money just floods from the ceiling. $1 billion drops onto them. And he's like, holy shit. But that's what that character would do in that moment. Like, why would you think for a second that your friend is telling the truth about this thing being a real wish? And if it is, sorry, dude, I'd rather have $1 billion. It was such a great moment in the movie, and then he gets shot 2 seconds later, which is super annoying. But it was such a great moment in the movie where I was like, that's so true to character. And this guy is both likable and unlikable. He's trying to convince Bear how to hit on Nikki while he's simultaneously hooking up with her on the side on occasion. He's entitled to hook up with whoever he wants to. And he's also entitled to be like, hey, if she wants to be with you and stop hooking up with me, that's great. He's just a very full, rich character. And I just appreciated that they went to the work of making a side character a real person.
I love it when writers write characters true to the character that they've established.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I love that. It just destroys a movie when they don't. I also really like when filmmakers put an obvious archetypal character into a movie and then make them act against archetype.
I agree.
I think those are great. The one that comes to mind isn't a great example. It's just the one that comes to mind. It's the Hans character in Frozen, where he's the archetypal, prince that she falls in love with. And then at the end, he ends up being the manipulative bad guy.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was great. I'm like, thank you for treating your audience like they're intelligent.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the Prince Hans character. I thought he was, like you said, I thought he was very well written. Okay, Josh, I want to talk about the controversy of this film because it is fascinating. And this is going to have some, I hope, sort of longer reach effect on the industry as a whole. So let me walk you through what the controversy is, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit. Okay, so Obsession was made for a tiny budget. It's reported that they spent about $750,000, and this became then a massive breakout hit. It's making somewhere between like $175 and $300 million. That's just as of now. It's going to make more money, down the line. It's going to make more money in DVD sales, which is still a thing. It's going to make more money licensed to, home video, stuff like that. That success made the crew pay look really brutal. So there was a below-the-line person at the center of this, whose name was Sally Choi, and she was the film's art director, which, by the way, the art direction in this movie was fucking stellar. She was paid $300 a day, totaling $6,700 after taxes, no mileage reimbursement. She did way more than just the art directing, and this is all according to her. PA work, set dressing, graphic design, background acting, driving, swing, buying runs, returns. She was a PA. She did everything. And this happens on, indie films. People wear a lot of hats. She says that the work took a physical toll on her, and that she regretted not trying to flip the production to a union production. Curry's response, and Curry Barker is the director, was, I respect the art department, but I wasn't a producer, and on movies this small, the people who directly benefit financially are usually the people who took the financial risk. He also said he hoped everyone who worked hard on the movie would get career opportunities from the film's success the way that he now is. Man, I could not be less in Curry Barker's camp on this one. People really don't have a good understanding of how hard crew gets worked on movie sets. And some of the responses like, I would love to make $300 a day. I'm sure you would. The problem is, for an art director, they might only do 2 or 3 movies a year. So you can't live on $300 a day if you're only working 50 days out of the year. You have to go get a new job every time you're not on a film.
Right.
And so, $750,000 is what they spent. To not then have the crew share in that success is absolutely insane. And this goes a little bit to the idea, Josh, of consent. Some people are saying, look, she signed the deal. She agreed to it. This is what happens with low-budget movies. Sure, but if your skill set is this, and someone comes to you and says, this is all I can pay, do you want to work or don't you want to work today? You're going to take that job. You kind of have to take that job. And if everybody on a film set above the line is sharing in the success, you should be able to share in the success too. I think it's a no-brainer, and I think it's one of those parts of Hollywood that needs to change. There's one easy fix for it. If a show gets theatrical distribution, then everybody involved should get paid union wages.
Okay.
And essentially it should flip to a union project. And I'll give you an example. Honora was a movie that we have covered and was a movie a couple years ago that did really well. That movie flipped in the middle to a union production. And so all of a sudden people needed to be paid more, et cetera, et cetera. And there were union protections. Union protections like you don't have to do 8 other jobs. You can just do your job because that's somebody else's job. And that's the sort of things that the union protects against. But if you know you want to distribute a $750,000 film, if you know it's good enough to distribute it in 1,000 screens across the country, then yes, you need to back pay everybody who worked on the film whatever the union rates would be. It's a very simple way of solving this part of the problem.
Well, Jeff, you bring up a fascinating issue about consent that I didn't really touch on when I talked about the 4 components of consent. But this is a topic I've thought about a lot, and I'll tell you why in a second. But there's a hidden 5th component of consent that we don't really talk about. And that is that society has agreed that this is something you can consent to.
Yeah.
And that applies here. And let me tell you where this concept came to me first. In 2008, I was deployed to Iraq, and I was seeing lots and lots of soldiers for psychiatric purposes, etc. And what occurred to me for these 19, 20, 21-year-old soldiers was that, well, this is what you signed up for.
Right.
And I had the thought that there is literally no way you could understand what you're signing up for. I mean, you could say that is, the information piece. You don't have all the information to know what you're consenting to. But society has decided, it's okay. If these people don't really have information about what they're signing up to, we still need them to be soldiers. Right. And so that's kind of this 5th hidden piece of consent, is that society has decided that this is something you can consent to. That's what's going on here, I think.
And that same thing happens on film sets and this is the part that crushes me. I have worked with so many below-the-line people at this point. I've worked with incredible grips and ADs and script supervisors, etc. They all want the same thing that I do, which is to work on a really great movie. And they're doing everything that they can to make it a really great movie. You know who's not? The executive producers who aren't doing anything, who brought the money to the table so that someone else could work on the movie. But they're not in the trenches working on the film the way that the grips are. And so they want the movie to be hugely successful. They're motivated to do it. And let's say the director comes to them and says, hey, I really need you to do something that's outside of the purview of an art director. That person's going to do it. And they're not protected from it. It's wrong to ask, but they do, and they do whatever they can, and they just want the same thing as everybody else, which is for the movie to be a hit. And then when it's a hit, they get stiffed. That's ridiculous. It is just ridiculous. And the overall treatment of below the line is just terrible. And this is the part that I think is important. Hollywood should be seeing a reckoning when it comes to this. There is a contraction that's happening in the industry because of streaming. And streaming services have realized, hey, we don't need to pump out as much new stuff because people are watching old stuff that we're providing for them. And so that's where this sort of contraction of the industry has happened. And so people are making less stuff. Well, producers and executive producers still want to make all the money. And so they're squeezing people as well as they can possibly squeeze them to continue to make money. We now have the opportunity to look at new lines of distribution and getting our stuff out there. Stuff like YouTube that has popped up. You can independently distribute. You don't need the money that you used to need. And if everybody chips in, you can make something pretty low budget and defer payment and let everybody involved in the actual physical production let everybody in on the success of the film. That model, I think, is coming. And Markiplier, a YouTube filmmaker, just did this. He made a feature film, distributed it himself. It ended up in the theaters, but he, it's not like he had a sales agent, I don't think. I think he just, did it himself. And then paid everybody. The movie did really well, and he paid everybody who worked on it. That's the model that we can have. We can cut out the suits who aren't doing anything other than connecting to people from making the money. And look, if someone puts up the $750,000, I get it. You want to make your money back. You want to make as much money as possible. I don't have any problem with that. The problem is you will see 5 or 6 or 7 executive producers who have nothing to do with it and who just like had access to so-and-so. And they're like, I want 5%, for connecting to people. And that's where the industry needs to have this massive reckoning. And this is a really good indicator of why. This was made for virtually nothing. And, and everybody who made it should marvel in the success. All right, Josh, I think we covered Obsession pretty well. I've got a top 5 for us if we're ready to get to the...
Let's do it. Oh, I can't wait. What is your top 5 this week, Jeff?
Okay, so it's a very fascinating moment in time right now where people are starting to pay attention to YouTube filmmakers. And Curry Barker was a YouTube filmmaker, ended up being able to make Obsession. There's another kid who just made Backrooms. That was a YouTube filmmaker. He got to make, Backrooms, which is an even bigger budget movie than Obsession. And I saw both of them this weekend. Pretty great. I thought that both of them, certainly had value. I liked Obsession more than Backrooms. I could talk about Backrooms at another time, but either way, a really fun movie. So my top 5, and this is a gift for all you producers out there. This is the top 5 list of the next 5 YouTubers that are about to pop off and are worthy of getting their chance at a feature film.
Well, and that's true because obviously Jeff and I are star makers, hit makers with this podcast listened to by dozens and dozens of people. So you're not laughing.
I'm just hurt.
I'm gonna get that part's totally gonna get
no,
cut.
absolutely
Okay.
not. It's good.
So
it's not gonna
here's the top 5 list that nobody asked for.
Nobody asked for this.
Of
Although
Jeff's
they should.
top 5 YouTube filmmakers about to hit it big. All right, Jeff.
Yeah.
Give us. Is this any particular order? Or is this just 5 of them?
Yeah, I do have an honorable mention today.
Okay, give me the honorable mention.
So the honorable mention is a guy named Zach Ramelan. Zach is a young filmmaker. I watch his stuff. Yeah, I did a fair amount of research for this, to find people that I wasn't watching. I follow Zach's channel. I think Zach's channel is fantastic. He does a really good job of talking about, how to make movies. The reason he's an honorable mention is because technically he has made a feature. I think it was just self-funded. Okay. But because he's already made a feature, he doesn't technically qualify. But I still think that a big production company needs to give him a shot. He just does a great job of turning really basic footage into something that feels very polished and filmic. He does really low budget stuff that looks fantastic. He's just the guy who loves making movies. He can make something commercially sharp, energetic. He is strong at every level, and he deserves a producer saying, hey, let me greenlight something for you.
Awesome. All right. Your honorable mention is Zach Ramalama Ding Dong. So let's move on to your number 5 here.
So number 5 is Connor Story. He made a movie called Cokes, or short film called Cokes. It's a black and white horror short about a woman being haunted by a strange, stringy, almost hair-like entity. Is less of a traditional scare machine and more like finding a cursed VHS in someone's basement. He also just did something called Jerry the Ginger Eater, and that's a more colorful horror comedy about a cannibal who only eats redheads, which I've never understood the hatred towards redheads and redhead humor, but I know it's a thing.
They're tastier.
Okay. His channel is called Sinmonger. Go check him out. He should get a feature sometime soon.
All right, that's Connor Story. Number 4, Jeff.
Number 4, give me Julian Terry.
Yep.
Don't Peek is a brilliantly simple horror short built around someone playing a video game and slowly realizing the danger is leaking into the real room. Yeah. He also did a film called They Hear It, Whisper, and The Nurse. He's very clean. It's economical studio horror instincts. He's great at taking one scary premise and executing it with just zero fat. His channel is called his name. It's Julian Terry. Go check him out as well.
Wow, okay. A lot of horror on this list, Jeff.
The thing with horror is it's cheap.
Okay.
It's cheap to make.
You've mentioned
that's why.
that before.
Yeah.
Okay, number 3 on your list.
Number 3 is also a YouTuber that I follow religiously, and it's Danny Gevirtz. He made a short called I Like Your Pants, short film that shows his feel for grounded, human, visually polished storytelling. He also posts a bunch of behind the scenes, documentary, commercial, directing process videos, which is why I follow him. He's really, really good at describing the filmmaking process. He's very warm, cinematic. He's emotionally grounded. He's less of a look on my cool camera and more I know how images create feeling sort of filmmaker. I think he's great. You could give him something with a lot of heart and he would do a lot with it. And his channel is also just his name, which is Dan Ekeverts. And I'll put links to all these in the description.
Dan Ekeverts, I like your pants. Yeah. Jeff, didn't you write a children's book called The Christmas Pants at one point?
I did. Arthur and his Christmas pants.
Arthur and his Christmas pants.
His Christmas pants just want to have adventure and he chases them around the world.
Who wouldn't love that? All right, Jeff, you're number 2. Film.
All right, number 2, Victoria Vincent. A couple of her films, Nothing to Hide and Life Wasters. Her animated shorts, which turn anxiety, shame, overstimulation, and social weirdness into these distorted little emotional panic attacks. Her channel has over 1.5 million subscribers and around only 30 videos. Her stuff is fantastic. It's raw, it's surreal, it's anxious, it's funny. It's got that ugly, beautiful adult animation feel. It's like brain rot turned into poetry. She's fantastic. Her channel is called Viewn, Vewn. And, I would love to see an adult animated film of hers in theaters sometime soon.
Okay. All right, Jeff. Now, and I feel like I might know where this is going, but who is your number 1 YouTube filmmaker that deserves a big shot?
So number 1 YouTube filmmaker that deserves a big shot is, and he's actually less successful than most people on these lists, but he's just ready to pop. And his name is Jeffrey Jones.
Right. Okay. My favorite YouTube filmmaker.
Yeah, he's massive. He's like 6'8". He has a podcast with his brother called Cinemental, and they talk a lot about mental health and cinema. He writes a lot about what it's like to be a dad. He's got an amazing script he's working on right now that's a feature about dads and justice. It's incredible. It's a Prisoners-esque Denis Villeneuve type of film. It's going to be incredible. I hope you're going to see it in theaters within the next 3 years. But yeah, Jeffrey Jones is probably the person on this list that's the most ready to just pop off and get a feature. Number of shorts that he's made, very successful. He won TO Webfest with Instagrammy back in the day. Incredible filmmaker, and you can check him out at The Filmmaker Professor is the name of his YouTube channel.
Wow. I
might already be there.
I will definitely check that out. Yeah. Wow. Thank you for turning me on to these new YouTube filmmakers that I have never heard of before until today. Yeah. So
I gave you an honorable mention so that I could give you a legit top 5, and then, as well as myself. Although I'm in the legit top 5, I absolutely need to be directing a feature next. I've directed enough shorts now that I'm ready for a feature.
Yeah, I agree. I would, Jeff, I would go watch your stuff.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
I mean, if I had a free weekend with nothing else to do.
And there was no Victoria Vincent movie playing in the theaters.
Well, I mean, whatever. She's got nothing to hide. I would definitely waste my life watching her stuff.
Thank you, Josh. All right, that's my top 5 list this week that nobody asked for, but should. Josh, any last thoughts for the viewers in terms of obsession, codependence, consent? Any last things you want to kick us off with?
Yeah, Jeff, consent is so important. And I'm gonna push aside consent around the sexual relationship realm, because I think we've got so much to do in that realm. We've got a lot to talk about. Yeah. But I think what I really want to help people understand right now with the last little bit we have is how fundamental consent is, the asking for and the giving of permission to do something, how fundamental that is to our human compact with each other. And it's one of the things that I see kind of breaking down in our society is this lack of asking for and accepting and then honoring consent. You see it with our government. You see it kind of with technological companies. We don't really know what companies are doing with the information we're giving them through AI. We just don't know. I can't describe it to you. Therefore, am I able to give consent? I would say not. But again, we're talking about that fifth hidden piece of consent. It's what society has said is okay to consent to.
Right.
I want us to think about that very, very carefully as we move forward over the next 10 years with technology, with AI, and everything that supposedly can make our life easier. Because when we don't ask the questions of what am I actually agreeing to, what am I actually consenting to, then you are giving away consent that you probably don't have to give. And that is going to end up being one of the tragedies of the technological age.
Yeah, I agree. I have so much more to say about that, but we're going to save it for another time. But I mean, I think that's really well said, and that is the fear. That is what's coming. That is the next battle that is coming. We need to fight it. Okay, thanks as always for watching and listening to Cinemental and our coverage of Obsession. Cinemental is produced by me, Jeff Jones, and edited by David Haverty. If you like this episode, please subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also watch clips of Cinemental on YouTube, where we would love to hear what you would like us to cover next. You can also watch my companion series, The One Thing, where I take a deeper dive into screenwriting, both available on the Large and in Charge channel on YouTube. You can find Dr. Jones on Netscape or by following him on LinkedIn. This has been a Large and in Charge production in association with PMC Media. For Dr. Josh Jones, I am Jeff Jones, and we will see you next week. Josh, usually those are false, but you actually can follow Dr. Josh Jones on LinkedIn.
I want you to hit me as hard as you can.